Henry gripped the worn handle of his toolbox as he walked through the narrow corridors of the repair dock. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the metal floor. He had been working at this repair facility for 7 years, fixing ships, solving mechanical problems, and earning just enough to pay his small apartment rent. Today felt like any other day, but it would change everything. His supervisor, a gruff man named Robert, called him into the office. Robert sat behind a cluttered desk, papers scattered everywhere, half-empty coffee cups pushed to the corners. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. Henry wondered what was wrong. Robert rarely called him in unless there was a problem. "Henry, I've got a big job for you," Robert said, his voice serious. "There's a ship in Bay 7. It's damaged badly. The client is, well, let's just say she's important. Very important. I can't say more than that, but this job needs to be done right. No shortcuts, no excuses. Can you handle it?" Henry nodded. He always handled jobs well. That was his reputation. He was the mechanic people trusted when things really mattered. "I'll do my best, sir," Henry replied. "I know you will," Robert said. "That's why I'm sending you. The client arrives at noon. The ship is already in the bay. Just start the preliminary inspection and see what you're dealing with." Henry thanked him and left the office, walking toward Bay 7. He had no idea what he was about to find. No idea that his life was about to take a turn he never expected. Bay 7 was one of the largest bays in the facility. As Henry approached the entrance, he stopped dead in his tracks. The ship was massive. Enormous. It was at least 3 times larger than any vessel he had worked on before. The hull was sleek and curved, with strange patterns etched across its surface. He recognized it immediately as an off-world design, something built by an alien species. The damage was severe. One entire side of the ship had deep gouges cut into the metal, as if something had raked sharp claws across it. Several panels were missing, exposing the internal systems beneath. Sparks occasionally jumped from exposed wires. The ship looked wounded, like it had barely survived whatever had damaged it. Henry walked around the vessel slowly, his trained eye cataloging every problem. This was going to be complicated. This was going to take time. But Henry loved complicated jobs. They challenged him. They made him feel like his work mattered. He was making notes on a handheld device when he heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Multiple footsteps. He looked up. What he saw took his breath away. An alien woman emerged from the shadows. She was tall, impossibly tall. At least 12 feet high. Her skin was a deep blue color, almost like the night sky. She had 8 limbs, 2 legs, 2 primary arms, and 4 secondary arms that moved with graceful precision. Her eyes were large and golden, reflecting the light of the bay. Despite her alien appearance, there was something unmistakably feminine about her. She was powerful and commanding, but there was also something else in her expression. Exhaustion. Frustration. Worry. Henry's heart raced. He had never seen an alien in person before. He had heard about them, of course. Trade relations between Earth and other worlds had been established 15 years ago. But seeing one face-to-face was completely different from hearing about them in the news. The alien woman walked toward him, her many limbs moving with an otherworldly grace. Behind her came 3 smaller creatures, her children, Henry realized. They huddled close to her, their eyes wide and afraid. A 4th child, even smaller than the others, peered out from behind one of her legs. "You are the mechanic," the alien woman said. Her voice was deep and musical, with an accent Henry couldn't quite place. "The one they sent to fix my ship." Henry swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Henry. I'll do everything I can to get your ship back in working order." The alien woman looked at him for a long moment. Henry felt exposed under her gaze, like she was reading everything about him. "I am Vera," she said finally. "This is my freighter. It was damaged 3 days ago when we encountered a meteor storm. The primary systems are failing. The navigation is offline. I have been stranded here with my children, waiting for repairs. My company has important business that needs my attention. Time is critical." Henry noticed something in her tone. Beneath the formal words there was something else. Desperation. Fear. She wasn't just worried about her business. She was worried about her children. She was worried about being stuck here. Without thinking, Henry said something he normally wouldn't say to a client. "Are your children okay? Are they scared?" Vera looked surprised by the question. Most clients didn't ask such things. They just wanted their ships fixed. "They are frightened," Vera admitted. "They have never been stranded before. They are worried." Henry felt something shift in his chest. He understood that feeling. Fear. Being worried about people you loved. He looked at the smallest child, the one still peeking out from behind Vera's leg. The child reminded him of his own nephew, innocent, confused, afraid of the unknown. "Don't worry," Henry said, looking directly at Vera. "I will fix your ship. It might take a few days, but I promise you I will make it safe for your family. You can trust me." Vera stared at him. Her golden eyes seemed to search his face for deception, for insincerity. But Henry meant every word. He was a mechanic who believed in doing things right. He believed in honesty. He believed in helping people, especially when they were vulnerable. "Thank you," Vera said quietly. "That is kind of you to say." "I'm not just saying it," Henry replied. "I mean it." That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment Vera began to see Henry as more than just a worker hired to fix her ship. And that was the moment Henry began a journey that would reshape not just his life, but the life of an alien mother and her children, and ultimately the business practices of an entire galactic empire. Henry set down his toolbox and got to work. Henry had been working on Vera's ship for 3 days straight. He barely slept, catching only a few hours of rest on a makeshift bed in the maintenance lounge. His hands were sore, covered in small cuts from the sharp alien metal. His back ached from bending over countless repairs. His eyes felt heavy from staring at complex wiring diagrams and circuit boards. But he didn't complain. Not once. The damage to the ship was worse than he had initially thought. The meteor strike had not just damaged the outer hull. It had affected the core systems. The power generator was running at only 40% capacity. The life support system was failing. The navigation computer had completely shut down. Each problem led to another problem, like pulling on a thread and unraveling an entire sweater. Most mechanics would have given up. Most would have called it impossible. But Henry was different. He approached each problem like a puzzle. He studied the ship's design carefully. He read through technical manuals written in a language that wasn't even English, using translation software to understand what he needed to know. He improvised solutions when standard parts didn't fit. He worked through problems that seemed unsolvable. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. Henry was deep inside the ship's engine room, surrounded by massive cylindrical machines that hummed with barely contained power. He was so focused on rewiring a critical circuit that he didn't notice the small figure entering the room. It was Pip, Vera's youngest child. The little alien had somehow managed to slip away from her mother's supervision. Pip was about 3 feet tall, with the same blue skin as her mother but smoother, less marked by age and experience. She had 6 limbs instead of 8, still developing into adulthood. Her golden eyes were wide with curiosity, staring at the strange human working among the machinery. Henry looked up suddenly and jumped back. For a moment he felt fear. What if this creature was dangerous? What if Vera would be angry at him for being near her child? But then he saw Pip's face. She wasn't threatening or aggressive. She was simply curious. She was a child, exploring a new and interesting place. Henry recognized that look. He had seen it on his nephew's face countless times. "Hey there," Henry said gently, lowering his tools. "Are you supposed to be in here?" Pip didn't answer. She couldn't speak English. But she tilted her head, a gesture that seemed to mean she was listening. Henry realized he was hungry. He had forgotten to eat that morning. His stomach was growling. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a nutrition bar, something he always carried for emergencies. He opened it and took a bite, then broke off a piece and held it out to Pip. "Want some?" he asked. Pip cautiously approached. She sniffed the bar with what looked like a small nose-like opening on her face. Then she took the piece and ate it. Her eyes grew wide with what Henry interpreted as surprise or pleasure. "Good, huh?" Henry smiled. They spent the next hour together. Henry continued working, but now with Pip watching carefully. He tried to explain what he was doing, even though he knew she couldn't understand his words. He pointed to different parts of the engine. He showed her how circuits connected to each other. He let her touch some of the non-dangerous equipment, letting her explore. Pip loved it. She made little chirping sounds that Henry thought might be laughter. She pointed at different things, asking questions in her own language that Henry couldn't answer. But somehow they communicated anyway. Not with words but with gestures and understanding. When Vera found them an hour later, Henry expected anger. Instead he saw something else in her eyes. Something like wonder. Something like hope. Later that evening, Henry was bandaging a deep cut on his hand. He had torn it open on a sharp piece of metal that afternoon, but he had been too focused on his work to stop and treat it. The wound had bled for hours without his noticing. Now it throbbed painfully. Vera appeared in the maintenance room where he was working. She saw the cut immediately. "You are hurt," she said. It wasn't a question. "It's nothing," Henry replied. "Just a small cut. Happens all the time in this work." "This happened hours ago," Vera said. She had been watching him more carefully than he realized. "You did not stop working. You did not mention it. You did not ask for help." Henry shrugged. "The work needed to be done. Your family needs this ship to be safe. That's what matters." Vera stared at him for a long moment. Henry saw something change in her expression. It was like watching ice melt. Her hard, businesslike exterior seemed to crack, and beneath it was something softer. Something more vulnerable. "Come," Vera said. "Eat with me and my children tonight." Henry was surprised. Clients didn't usually invite workers to eat with them. But he was too tired to question it. He cleaned up and followed Vera to the ship's main cabin. The cabin was surprisingly comfortable. The furniture was scaled to Vera's size, but she had arranged smaller chairs for her children. A meal was laid out on a table, various alien foods that Henry had never seen before. Vera showed him what was safe for human consumption and what wasn't. As they ate, Vera told him her story. She explained that she was a widow, that her husband had died 5 years ago running this same business. She told him how difficult it was to be a single mother in a galaxy full of cutthroat competitors. She told him about the pressure she faced, the loneliness, the constant fear that she might fail her children. Henry listened. He didn't offer empty sympathy or meaningless words. He simply listened. And somehow that was exactly what Vera needed. When the meal ended, Vera looked at Henry with her golden eyes. "You are different," she said. "You care about people. Not profit. Not efficiency. People. That is rare. Very rare indeed." Henry felt something warm in his chest. For the first time in his life he felt like his work, his care, his effort mattered to someone who truly understood. Henry was in the middle of replacing a damaged coolant pump when he heard the loud voice echoing through the repair bay. It was an angry voice, the kind of voice that belonged to someone used to getting their way. He climbed down from the ship's interior and looked outside. A woman stood in the bay entrance. Her name was Victoria, and she worked for the corporate office that managed the repair facility. Henry had never met her before, but he recognized the type immediately. She wore an expensive suit. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her face looked cold and hard, like someone had carved it from stone. She carried a tablet computer and a folder full of documents. Victoria walked directly toward Vera, who was standing near the ship's loading ramp. She didn't greet her politely. She didn't ask how Vera was doing. She simply began speaking in a harsh, demanding tone. "The repairs are taking too long," Victoria said. "You were supposed to be finished 3 days ago. My calculations show this job should have been completed by now. We need to accelerate the timeline and reduce costs." Vera looked confused. "The ship was severely damaged," she said calmly. "The repairs require precision and care. My family's safety depends on quality work." "That's not my concern," Victoria replied coldly. She pulled out several sheets of paper from her folder. "I've drawn up a new work plan. We're cutting the repair timeline in half. We're also using cheaper parts and simplified procedures. The cost savings will be significant." Henry felt his stomach drop. He walked over to them, his hands instinctively clenching into fists. "Excuse me," he said, trying to keep his voice level. "But those cuts would compromise the ship's safety systems. The life support system is still unstable. The navigation computer needs more calibration. If we rush this, the ship could fail in space." Victoria turned to look at Henry like he was an insect she had found on her shoe. "And who are you?" she asked dismissively. "I'm the lead mechanic on this project," Henry replied. "My name is Henry. And I need to be clear, I cannot sign off on these shortcuts. It's not safe." Victoria's face turned red with anger. "You don't have a choice in the matter," she snapped. "I'm the corporate supervisor. I make the decisions here. You're just a worker. You follow orders." "Not when those orders endanger lives," Henry said firmly. He looked at Vera. "Ma'am, I cannot allow this ship to leave this bay unless it is completely and properly repaired. I won't risk your family's safety." Victoria stepped closer to Henry, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Listen to me very carefully. You will follow my orders or I will destroy you. I will file complaints with every repair facility in this sector. I will make sure you never work as a mechanic again. I will blacklist you so thoroughly that you won't be able to get a job flipping burgers at a food stand. Do you understand me?" Henry's heart was pounding. He understood exactly what Victoria was saying. She had the power to ruin his life. She had the power to take away the only thing he knew how to do, the only thing that gave his life meaning. But he also knew something else. He knew that if he gave in to her threats, he would be responsible for what happened to Vera and her children. "I understand," Henry said quietly. "And I'm sorry, but I still can't do it. I won't compromise on safety." Victoria's face twisted with rage. "You're finished? Finished? I'm calling security right now. You're off this job. You're off this facility. You'll never." "That's enough." The voice came from behind them. It was calm but carried immense authority. Henry, Victoria, and several other workers in the bay turned to look at the speaker. Vera stepped forward. She had removed a small communication device from her pocket. Her golden eyes were blazing with fury. "I am calling off your employment effective immediately," she said to Victoria. Her voice was like thunder. "You will leave this facility within the hour." Victoria looked shocked. "You can't fire me," she sputtered. "I work for the corporate office. You can't just." "I can and I will," Vera interrupted. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who owns this facility? Do you know who owns every repair dock in this sector?" Victoria's face went pale. She clearly didn't know. She was starting to understand that she had made a terrible mistake. "It is me," Vera said coldly. "I own everything. Every facility. Every dock. Every company that operates here. I own them all. I have been operating through shell corporations and business partners so I could observe how my companies actually treat people. What I have seen from you, Victoria, is greed, cruelty, and complete disregard for human life and safety. That ends now." Victoria started to speak, but Vera held up one of her hands. "Security," she called out. 2 guards appeared from different parts of the bay. "Escort this woman from the premises. Make sure she leaves the sector within 24 hours. If she returns, she will face legal consequences." As Victoria was led away, protesting and threatening, Henry felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that she was gone. Gratitude that Vera had stood up for him. But also something else. A sudden, sharp pain in his chest. Vera turned to Henry. He expected her to thank him. He expected her to praise him for his integrity. Instead, he felt his trust crumble. "Why didn't you tell me?" Henry asked, his voice quiet and hurt. "Why didn't you tell me you own this place? You let me think I was just another worker being hired to do a job. You let me think you were a regular client. You let me believe that you cared about me as a person. But this whole time you were watching me. Testing me. Like I was some kind of experiment." Vera looked shocked. "Henry, that is not." "I risked everything for you," Henry continued, his voice growing stronger. "I stood up to Victoria even knowing she could destroy my career. I did it because I thought you were someone who deserved my loyalty. But now I realize I was just your employee. Just the help. Your kindness was probably just pity." "That is not true," Vera said urgently. "Henry, please let me explain." But Henry had already turned away. He didn't want to hear explanations. He didn't want to hear lies. He walked back toward the ship, trying to ignore the pain in his chest that hurt far worse than any physical injury ever could. Henry threw himself into his work with a kind of desperate energy. He didn't speak to Vera. He didn't look at her when she walked through the bay. He simply worked, pushing himself harder than he ever had before. His hands moved across circuits and systems with precision and care. Every connection was perfect. Every repair was flawless. He was going to finish this ship properly, not because Vera owned the company but because it was the right thing to do. 2 days later, Henry was performing the final systems check. This was the most critical part of the entire repair process. Every system had to work perfectly. Every backup had to function. Every safety protocol had to be in place. One mistake could be catastrophic. Henry ran the diagnostics carefully, watching as data scrolled across the computer screen. Most systems checked out fine. The engine was running smoothly. The life support was stable. The power generator was operating at full capacity. But then he got to the navigation system. Something was wrong. Henry's eyes narrowed as he studied the readouts. The navigation computer was showing anomalies that shouldn't exist. He ran the diagnostic again. Same result. Then he ran it a third time very slowly, watching every detail. His blood ran cold. If the ship had launched with the shortcuts Victoria had ordered, the navigation system would have failed catastrophically approximately 24 hours into flight. There would have been no warning. The ship would have simply become lost in space, unable to correct its course. Without navigation, Vera and her 4 children would have drifted into the vast emptiness of the void. They would have run out of oxygen within days. They would have died. Henry sat back in his chair trying to breathe. His hands were shaking. He had been right. His refusal to cut corners hadn't just been about being careful. It had been about saving lives. If Victoria had gotten her way, if Henry had given in to her threats, Vera's entire family would have perished in the darkness of space. He fixed the navigation system carefully, recalibrating every circuit, replacing every damaged component. It took him another 6 hours. When he was finished, he ran the diagnostic one final time. Perfect. Everything was perfect. Henry sat in the darkness of the repair bay for a long time afterward. He thought about his refusal. He thought about the cost. He thought about the reward. And he realized something important. He had done the right thing not because Vera was wealthy or important, but because it was simply the right thing to do. The next morning, Henry presented his completion report to Robert, the supervisor. Robert reviewed it carefully, his eyes moving across page after page of detailed notes and test results. Finally, he looked up. "This is excellent work, Henry," Robert said. "Absolutely excellent. But I have to tell you something. There's been a major change in the corporate structure. Victoria is gone. Fired. And someone else is taking over. Someone very high up. She's coming here this morning to meet with you personally." Henry's heart sank. He thought Vera was done with him. He thought she had already finished her business here. An hour later, Vera walked into the office. She was alone without her children. She was wearing formal clothing now, something more official than what Henry had seen before. She looked powerful and authoritative but also sad. "Henry," she said simply, "I need to talk with you. Will you come with me?" Henry followed her to a private conference room in the facility. Vera closed the door behind them and gestured for him to sit. Henry remained standing. "I owe you an apology," Vera began. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning. But I needed to know something. I needed to know if you would do the right thing even when it was difficult. Even when it was costly. So I was just a test," Henry said bitterly. "No," Vera said firmly. "That is not what you were. But yes, I was observing you. I needed to see if you were someone of integrity. Someone whose word meant something. And Henry, you passed that test in ways I never expected." Vera pulled out a tablet computer and showed him the navigation diagnostics. "You found the flaw," she said. "The flaw that Victoria's shortcuts would have made catastrophic. Your refusal to compromise on safety didn't just protect my family. It demonstrated exactly why ethical business practices matter. It showed me that one person's integrity can literally save lives." Henry didn't know what to say. "I am restructuring my entire company," Vera continued. "Every facility, every dock, every operation. I am removing every executive who operates like Victoria did. I am replacing them with people who understand that business success and ethical treatment of workers are not opposing forces. They go together." She looked directly at Henry. "I am offering you a position as chief of repairs across all my facilities. You will oversee quality standards. You will have authority to refuse unsafe work. You will make decisions about safety and ethics. And you will report directly to me." Henry felt tears forming in his eyes. "Why?" he asked. "Why do this for me?" "Because," Vera said quietly, "you showed me something I had forgotten. You showed me that humans possess a special quality. You can care about people you've never met. You can risk everything for strangers. You can choose what is right even when choosing wrong would be easier and safer. That quality is rare in this galaxy, Henry. It is precious." She stepped closer to him. "And more than that, you showed my children that integrity matters. You showed them that strength comes not from power or wealth, but from character. That is the most valuable gift you could have given me." Henry didn't trust himself to speak. He simply nodded. "There is one more thing," Vera said. She pulled out a small device. "I am calling my children here. I want them to see you. I want them to understand that you are not just an employee. You are a friend. You are family. Is that acceptable to you?" For the first time since the revelation, Henry smiled. "Yes," he said softly. "That is more than acceptable." Within minutes, Vera's 4 children entered the room. Pip rushed toward Henry and chirped happily, recognizing him immediately. The other 3 children seemed confused at first, but Vera explained who Henry was and what he had done. Henry realized then that his sacrifice, his refusal to compromise, his choice to do what was right, had changed everything. Not just for Vera and her family but for an entire company. For an entire way of doing business. And he had done it all simply by being human. Simply by refusing to give up on what was right. 3 years had passed since Henry became chief of repairs across Vera's vast network of facilities. The changes he implemented had spread like ripples across an ocean. What began as ethical standards at one repair dock had transformed into a complete revolution in how business was conducted throughout the sector. Henry's reputation had grown legendary. Workers spoke of him with respect and admiration. He was the human who had refused to compromise, who had stood up to corporate greed, and who had changed an entire industry. News outlets across multiple planets ran stories about his innovations and his commitment to both quality and worker welfare. Other companies, seeing Vera's success, began copying his methods. Within 2 years, ethical business practices became the industry standard rather than the exception. Vera too had changed. She was no longer the cold, distant businesswoman who only cared about profit margins. She had become known as a fair and visionary leader. The Galactic Commerce Council had noticed her transformation and had invited her to sit on their board of directors. She now influenced business practices across multiple star systems. But the change that mattered most to Henry happened in Vera's personal life. Her 4 children were growing up in a galaxy that was slowly becoming more compassionate, more ethical, more human in its values. They had learned from watching Henry work that integrity was strength, that kindness was power, and that doing the right thing was always worth the cost. One afternoon, Henry was working in the main repair facility when Pip approached him. She was older now, nearly as tall as a human adult, though still much smaller than her mother. Her golden eyes were bright with excitement and determination. "Henry," Pip said in careful English. She had been learning the human language for the past year. Her accent was thick, but her words were clear. "I want to ask you something important." Henry looked up from the circuit board he was examining. "Of course, Pip. What is it?" "I want to learn to be a mechanic," Pip said. "Like you. Will you teach me?" Henry felt something warm bloom in his chest. He looked at this young alien, this child he had once shared his lunch with in the engine room of a damaged ship. "I would be honored to teach you," he said sincerely. Vera appeared a few moments later, watching her youngest child and Henry together. She smiled. 3 years ago she might have steered Pip toward business school, toward management training, toward the corporate path. But she had learned something important from watching Henry work. She had learned that true excellence comes from understanding the details, from getting your hands dirty, from caring deeply about your work. "Thank you," Vera said quietly to Henry, when Pip had gone off to gather her tools. "For everything. For changing not just my business but my way of thinking about what matters." Henry smiled. "I just fixed a ship," he said simply. "Everything else happened because people chose to listen." Weeks turned into months. Pip worked alongside Henry every day after her studies. She learned quickly, her alien intelligence adapting to mechanical problems in ways that sometimes surprised even Henry. She asked good questions. She cared about quality. She understood that a mechanic's job was to care for the people who would depend on the machines they fixed. One evening, as they were finishing up work, Pip said something that made Henry pause. "My mother says you taught her that humans have a special gift. She says humans can care about people they don't know. She says that is why you are so important to us." Henry didn't know how to respond to that. He had never thought of himself as having any special gift. He was just a mechanic who did his job well and tried to treat people fairly. But then he understood. That was exactly what Vera meant. In a galaxy where most beings conducted business with cold calculation and self-interest, humans possessed something rare and valuable. They could choose compassion. They could choose integrity. They could sacrifice their own welfare for the sake of strangers. It was a simple gift, really, but it was powerful. 6 months later, the Galactic Commerce Council held a grand ceremony. Vera was being awarded the Beacon of Change Award for her work transforming business ethics across 3 different star systems. The ceremony took place in a massive amphitheater that could hold thousands of beings from hundreds of different species. Vera was invited to the stage to receive her award. But before she accepted it, she asked permission to say a few words. The council granted her request, looking curious. Vera stood at the podium and looked out at the assembled crowd. "This award recognizes my work," she said. "But I cannot accept this honor without telling you the truth. I did not do this alone. I was changed by someone else. Someone who showed me a better way." She gestured to Henry, who was sitting in the audience. Henry felt his face burn with embarrassment as hundreds of eyes turned toward him. "This is Henry," Vera said. "He is a human. A mechanic. 3 years ago he repaired my damaged ship. But more than that, he repaired something broken inside me. He showed me that business success and ethical treatment are not opposites. He showed me that one person's integrity can reshape an entire system." Vera paused, her golden eyes shining. "He taught me that humans possess a unique gift. They can care about strangers without expecting profit in return. They can choose what is right even when choosing wrong would be easier and safer. They can see someone different, someone alien, and still treat them with respect and kindness." She looked directly at Henry. That is humanity's real power. Not weapons. Not conquest. Not wealth. It is the power to choose compassion, even when the galaxy tells you that compassion is weakness. That is why I am proud to share this award with Henry, and with all the workers and leaders who have chosen to follow his example. The amphitheater erupted in applause. Beings of 100 different species stood and cheered. Henry felt tears on his cheeks. He hadn't done this for recognition or reward. He had simply done what he believed was right. Later that evening, Henry stood with Vera and her children looking out at the stars through the massive windows of the council building. Pip stood on one side of him, Vera on the other. "What happens now?" Henry asked. Vera smiled. "Now we keep going," she said. "We keep building on what we started. We keep spreading the idea that integrity matters. We keep showing the galaxy that there is a better way to do business." She placed one of her many hands on Henry's shoulder. "And we keep teaching the next generation like Pip that these values are worth fighting for." Henry looked at the stars and thought about all the beings out there, looking back at Earth and at humanity. They weren't looking for weapons or conquest. They were looking for hope. They were looking for proof that beings could choose to be better, to care more, to act with integrity. And that proof was Henry. A simple human mechanic who had refused to give up on what was right, and in doing so, had changed worlds.